Tales Podcast is a part of the Connected Podcast Network. Chef. Yes, Glio. Don't you love how we get to share our stories and recipes? Yes, I enjoy it greatly. Do you know what makes it possible for everyone to hear us? Yes, Glio. Our voices, obviously. True, but it's also Anchor, a hosting platform that distributes the podcast to places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and others. Oh, yes. And isn't everything needed to make a podcast in one place? That's correct. And the best thing of all, Chef, it's free. Free, you say? Free. And all I had to do is download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So, you just had to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Yep. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm and do what we're doing now. Fantastic, Grio. Simply fantastic. I know, Chef. I know.
Hello and welcome. I'm Aman Mazingo, and this is the AfroTales Podcast, a show that will explore the folklore, tales, myths, and legends of the African diaspora. Well, today we head to South Carolina, back to South Carolina, and we meet a couple young boys, an old man, and a witch, and the devil, all in one story. What happens is interesting. So please sit back, relax, and take a listen to the old witch. The old witch. Although Simon Brown believed in ghosts and spirits, he never talked much about witches and conjuring or casting spells. He had an old friend named Calvin Easterling, that's right, who knew a lot about witches. In fact, he took pleasure in telling small boys just how witches behaved at night. So Simon promised to take me up into Chesterfield County one day to meet Mr. Easterling, who had been a slave in South Carolina. When I shivered at the prospect, Simon told me not to be afraid of the old fella, because he wasn't a witch himself and didn't have the power to cast spells on anybody. Calvin Easterling couldn't even put a hand on you, hypnotize you, if he tried, said Simon. The devil never showed him how. Nevertheless, I felt more and more uneasy the closer we got to the Easterling's place up in Sand Hills. Calvin's got a heap of scuppernongs on his farm, Willie. And if you act nice and mannersable when you meet him, he might give you a bucketful. This good news made me feel better. Calvin Easterling's farm was fenced in with rails, Abraham Lincoln style, you know. I smelled the grapes before we reached the house on top of the hill. It smelled great. It was a one-room log cabin with a wide mud and stick chimney at one end. Smoke curled out of it. Mr. Easterling lived alone. "Howdy, folks," he called as we neared the door. "Glad to see you, Simon. And the youngin' you got with you? What's his name?" "Oh, he's Mr. Faulkner's young boy, Willie," answered Simon. "He pestered me until I just had to fetch him up here to meet you. Somebody at his mother's store told him how bad witches have been treating you. and he wanted to hear whether it was true or not. Sure, for certain it's true. Just you all come in the house for a spell. I tell you how bad that old Hessian, Liz Frida, has been treating me. She lives down on Joy Hewitt's place near Society Hill. But it's no trouble for that old witch to fly over at night and devil my milk cow and my old mule. You just look on out that door there at my cow. Look at the cockleburs in her hair, in her tail, and how her bags all shrunk up. She used to give 2 gallons of milk a day. But since that old witch has been riding her at night, the poor creature gives less than a pint of milk. I saw something boiling in a tin in Mr. Esteling's fireplace and ventured to ask what it was. He replied angrily, "Why, I'm melting a silver bullet for my musket. That old witch comes to my spring every morning, and she looks like a rabbit sitting there looking at my drinking water. Yesterday, I leveled down that rabbit with my gun and shot a hole plumb through his hide. But when I went to pick it up, wasn't there. It ain't nothing for a haunt from old Lizzie Frida. But I'm going to get it in the morning. I'm going to shoot it with my silver bullet. Lead can't kill a haunt, but silver can." I asked Calvin Easterling how a person could become a witch. I understand a witch has the power to become invisible, so nobody can see him move around. I hear he can change himself into something he wants to. Yes, that's so. But if you ever decide you want to be one, you'll have to sell your soul to the devil first. How can you do that if you don't know what the devil is or how to talk to him? I asked. Mr. Easterling cocked his head and looked hard at me. "Well, let me tell you how to become a witch first, and then you can make up your mind." I sat on the floor by the hearth and listened, faithful but fascinated. And this is the story he told me. Now, there was an old woman who lived up in these hills who wanted to be a witch. She lived in a 2-room log house with her brother. She stayed in one room and he stayed in the other, obviously. One day she went down to the woods and looked around until she found a hollow stump with water in the middle of it. That's the first thing you must do. Find a stump with water in it. Then the old woman went down to the cornfield and found an ear of Indian corn, the kind with different colored grains on the cob, red and blue and yellow and so forth. Then every night after that, she shelled off 1 grain of Indian corn and carried it down to the woods and put it on the edge of the hollow stump. Pretty soon, a jaybird came down and picked up that grain of corn and flew away to the devil to give it to him. The jaybird told the devil the old woman's name and where her house was. In this way, the devil knew she wanted to see him. But nobody expected that old jaybird knew where the devil lived, and he wouldn't tell nobody. It took the old woman 7 weeks to send for the devil. 1 grain of corn every Friday for 7 weeks. When the jaybird carried him the last grain of corn on that last Friday, poof, the devil appeared in the old woman's room. He was dressed in red from head to foot, and 2 little horns stuck out of the front of his head. "You sent for me?" the devil asked with his forked tongue. What do you want? What do you want? I want to be a witch, Mr. Devil, the old woman answered, almost scared to death. All right, but you will have to sell your soul to me first. Yes, sir, I will. If you give me the power to change myself into a bird or a beast and fix me so nobody can see me when I move around, I'll do more than that. Much more. But remember, your soul belongs to me, and I can come for you anytime I take a notion. Goodbye. And poof, he was gone. Late that same night, when her brother was sound asleep, the old woman stood in the middle of the room and took off her nightgown. Then she said, Skin, drop off me. And her skin dropped off. Then she picked it up and hung it on a peg. Skeeter, come here to me. And before you could wink your eyes, the old woman turned into a skeeter. That's a mosquito. And she flew through the keyhole. Just like that. When the old woman flew around the yard, she said, Hoot now, come here to me. And the next minute, there she was, a great big hooting owl. Then she flew away over the fields and houses and into sleeping people's cow lots and barns. And all through the night, the old Hessian meddled with the horses and mules and cows, putting cockleburrs in their tails and manes and tying them into knots. Then, just before daybreak, the old woman came back home and changed herself from an owl to a skeeter, flew through the keyhole into her room and changed to herself again. She took down her skin from the peg and said, Skin, come here to me. Then she jumped into her skin, put on her nightgown, and crawled in her bed. Now, this went on for many, many weeks, until one night the old woman's brother peeped through the crack and saw and heard all the curious things going on. He knew that his sister was a witch. So when she was gone, he went into her room and sprinkled salt and pepper inside her skin. When the old woman returned from her mischief, she took down her skin and said, Skin, come here to me. And she jumped in it, but the skin burned her, and she jumped out again. Skin, don't you know me? She cried. Just then, a great ball of fire came a-roaring through the window and caught the woman up and roared out the door with her. Poof! And the devil's voice was heard to say, Old woman, I have come for your soul. No one in the cabin stirred for a moment. Then Mr. Easterling whispered, Now, Willie, would you like to become a witch? No, sir. I'd be happy if I could just have a few of your scuppernongs, Mr. Easterling. The end. Wow. Yes, the old witch. Right? Another story from the American South. Can you tell? Can you tell right from the beginning? Where is Chesterfield County, South Carolina? If you are from this area, please contact me at AfroTalesPodcast AfroTalesPodcast@yahoo.com, AfroTalesCast on Twitter, AfroTalesPodcast on Instagram. Please just contact me and let me know if you know anything about this story or the old witch. This story was told by, I guess, a guy named William Faulker way back in the day. And I gotta admit, it's a good story, right? It's a great story. And the kid, he's like, yo, I want to be a witch. like why not? At least that's what his thinking was, and like, why not? And then finds out the cost or what he has to do to become a witch. And it just wasn't worth it, right? It just wasn't worth it. Like in the story I've told before, knowing the price that you have to pay is super important. But this old witch reminded me a lot of the boo hag. Didn't it remind you of the boo hag? That, she takes her skin off and hangs it on a hook and, goes about her business. But the only difference is that it's a witch versus a boo hag. Both hags, though, but different type of hags, I guess. But she's turning herself into all kind of animals, bugs, insects, and just messing with people, like she's just being mischievous. And the brother's like, oh no, I ain't gonna be no witch in my house. No, sis, I don't care if you my sister or not. Ain't gonna be no witch in my house. I ain't having it. You ain't doing it. I'm gonna stop it right now. And put salt and pepper in her skin. That's crazy to me. I love that. I love that aspect of the story. But here we go with the devil again, and making deals, making these Faustian deals. Really got to pay attention. You can't just be out there making deals, and everything that you want to be in life may not be the best thing for you in life. We know people that have made those choices in life, gone down those wrong paths, and because they thought it would be fun or awesome, or they saw somebody else doing it, or they heard somebody else doing it, and they thought like, whoops, that's what I want to do. Or it was just their situation, and that was just a choice they made, and they made the wrong one, and now they're paying for it. And I hate it. I know people that have done it. I have family members that have done it, made those wrong decisions, and have had to pay for it. I'm just lucky that the ones that I know personally haven't had to pay like the witch had to pay, and I'm so proud of them for changing their lives around. But so stories like this hit home, and I guess because the veil is thinning, it's getting to me more often. I actually see these stories in my own family more, and close friends more. But I don't want to get sad. I had fun reading this story. Can't wait till the next one. And again, thank you for coming and taking a listen. And if you know anything about this story from Chesterfield, South Carolina, please contact me. All right. Have a great day. And thank you again. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for supporting and sharing this podcast with your family and friends. You can always find Afro Tales Podcast on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to leave me a message or a tweet, I can be found on Twitter at AfroTalesCast, on Instagram and Facebook at AfroTalesPodcast, and now on Coffee at coffee.com/AfroTalesPodcast. where you can financially support me for the price of one small cup of coffee. However you support, I thank you and I appreciate it always. So until next time, have a great day.